Hey everybody, the patch has been out for about a week, and there's a lot to talk about with the new Empress Arcana, so I just wanted to gather my thoughts and talk about some of the different builds that are out there, some of the things that I'm thinking about with the class, and how a week of testing, where it's gotten me, and some of my thoughts about it. I'd love to know what you guys think as well, because I'm learning as much as you guys are, so here are my current thoughts. There's a lot to get through today, so let's dive right in. So I wanted to start out with big things that I wanted to make note of. It seems like Boundless is way more important for us than ever before. Boundless was really good before, but now it seems like it's even more important for us. So even to the point where very commonly, and I think in most cases, is worth it to do things like use four of a kind in your opener rotations, even when you have no stacks and nothing else to do, just to push your mana down. I feel like this in general has felt very, very worth it. One of the ways that I like to think about this, and again, all of this stuff is just so new, so more testing needs to be done. But I almost feel like when you're in Magic Addiction, you should basically only use Celestial Rain in Magic Addiction once if you can help it. If we go to the game screen here really quick, let's say, okay, I'm in Magic Addiction right now, right? Or rather, this is the start of the rotation. I might do something like Scratch, Call of Destiny Awakening, and I use one Celestial Rain here. And then now I'm actually trying to push my mana down. And since I didn't get any resets on my four of a kind, I can't really do anything. But I think it's actually worth it to try to push your mana down. And you see I just hit Boundless, and I use my second Celestial Rain. I feel like this is very, very, very worth it in the current scenario of the game. If my four of a kind did reset, I might do something where I just keep spamming four of a kind until it hits its cooldown, just so that I can force my mana bar down that much more, just to guarantee that by the time my Celestial Ring comes back up, I can use it inside that Boundless MP cycle rather than have it go on the long cooldown. There's nothing that feels worse right now for Arcana than using your Celestial Rain, and then that triggers your Boundless, so now you're in Boundless, but your Celestial Rain is like 14 seconds on cooldown or something like that, whatever it is, right? 15 seconds on cooldown. Okay, so that's the first biggest thing. The second point kind of follows that. Using four of a kind on 3 stacks or less is sometimes worthwhile. And like I said before, with hitting Boundless, I think it is very worth it to be using four of a kind and making use of that reset tripod to manage your mana bar. Okay, this is really big for Arcana right now. The third thing is managing the Clown card. This is something that can be very hard to track, but it's just little things. So, for example, I feel like Judgment right now is a card that's most valuable. So when you have Cull Judgement, I would always use Judgment second, right? So no matter which order it is, whether it's Cull Judgement or Cull Judgement or Judgment Cull, right? Whichever side it's on, it doesn't matter. You always want to use the Judgment second. This is also true of other scenarios. If you have something like Twisted Fate Cull or something like that, you probably want to use Cull second in this scenario, or Twisted Fate Judgment, or any other kind of card combination like that. You just always want to make sure which card you're using second. That should be the more valuable one, so that whenever Clown comes up, when you use Clown, it has a better chance of becoming the card that you want. The point to add on to this that I think is really important is that you don't need to use your cards now until you actually draw your second card and you can't build meter anymore. Because we're not relying on random chance to draw cards, there's no scenario where we draw 2 cards in a row. So our card draw is very predictable in the sense that every time our gauge fills up, that's when we're going to draw a card. What this means is we're not actually wasting anything until we actually hit our second card drawn and we can't gain any more meter. That's when you're forced to actually use a card. So with that in mind, make sure that you're always keeping track of what the last card you used is and try to optimize for making sure that it's a high value card as you can with things like Judgment or Cull or Wheel of Fortune or stuff like that. Finally, I feel like Star feels really, really, really bad. It's a very dead draw in our current meta because Boundless is so important, and they also changed Star to be even more mana regenerating. Not only does Star replenish our mana by I think about half now, but it also gives us mana regeneration over a duration of time, which hurts really, really badly. I don't really know what to think about it other than it kind of really sucks when you draw it. You definitely want to delay it if you've just hit Boundless. You want to try to not use it as much as you can. And then when you do use it, basically use it right when you hit Magic Addiction again. When you can't hold Boundless anymore, that's when you want to use Star. Or if there's downtime in a fight, use Star to try to get rid of it. But it is a very bad feeling card. I really don't like this aspect of the Arcana gameplay right now. It just seems categorically bad, at least for Empress Arcana. With that, let's talk about some of the builds that are playable and what some of my thoughts are about them right now and what I think the core concepts are. I did an early video talking about some of the things that can help people wrap their head around some of the rotations. And after doing further testing, I've learned a little bit more about them. And so I want to update everybody with some of my current thoughts. If you guys also have thoughts of your own, make sure to let me know. But the first build is going to be a 3 Ruin build with Return. Obviously, this is the one that I think is probably the most well-known. Nothing much to add here. This build, I think, gives you the steadiest output. You have abundance of tools to build up your stacks and spend your stacks. Because you have 2 sources of crit damage buff, you can basically use your Ruin skills at any time. One of the things about this build is you start to leak skills in certain scenarios. And what I mean by this is certain skills start to become redundant. So, for example, when you're in Boundless mana and you have the Moon card drawn, a lot of your stacking skills just start becoming wasteful, right? The fact that you have Scratch Dealer, Backflush, Spiral, and Call of Destiny kind of gets to be a little bit overkill sometimes. The Backflush usually ends up becoming a little bit extra in certain scenarios, and that can make the build feel a little bit weird. The Cull Judgement card is just generally less valued. One, you always have your crit damage buff for all cases. You're not running Serendipity, so Cull doesn't give you as much of a boost. The crit damage isn't as important because you already have so much uptime on your crit damage, even though it's still helpful. And then, of course, the Judgment is really good for 4 of a kind if you happen to get resets, but by and large, it doesn't actually add that much to your rotation. You don't get definitely not as big value with Judgment and Serendipity as you did before in the old 3 Rune skill build. So you don't have as strong of an upside as you did before running your 3 Rune skill build. Despite all of this, this current build gives you a good baseline of performance. You do very high damage. Everything feels very good. So I wanted to jump into some of the 4 Rune skill builds. And these things get a little bit more complicated, I feel. There are a few things that I want to talk overall about these builds first. I think these builds work better when you have higher level cooldown gems. It just makes your rotation a lot smoother and it makes everything kind of fit in a lot better. The core of your rotation is actually Scratch Dealer, Call of Destiny, use a Rune skill, and then 2 Spirals, and then use your next Rune skill. This is important because in Boundless, this can loop almost perfectly, especially if you have Moon, and especially if you have high level cooldown gems. If you don't, then you maybe need Moon, you maybe need an additional stacking skill here and there depending on how things work out. But this is basically like the heart of 4 Rune skill builds and why this works. This combo that I highlight, where you use Scratch, Call of Destiny, Rune Skill 1, Spiral Edge 2, Rune Skill 2, catches a 3-second crit damage window from Call of Destiny perfectly. And so you can use 2 Rune skills in that window. One thing to keep in mind is for Scratch Dealer, we're taking your crit synergy tripod on the first row instead of the excellent mobility tripod. This is to make up for the fact that in these builds, we're going to be replacing Return with Serendipity. So let's talk about option A. Option A is just to replace Return with Serendipity. And if we jump over to the game screen, these are the changes I would make. So currently I have my 3 Rune skill build here set up. And what we're going to do is we're going to take Return off of our bar. And so Scratch Dealer will want this weakness exposure tripod. And then we're going to go grab Serendipity and get it to level 10. Piercing Strike, Lucky Blow, Intended Luck, right? These are all the same tripods that we used before. And we just slap that on in place of Return. And then for your gems, obviously since we don't have Return, we're going to unequip that. And what I would recommend you do is you take a Serendipity damage gem and you slot it in. So that's basically it. That's basically all you would change from the 3 Rune skill build that I highlighted before. So getting back to this, what does it matter for us to take away return? Well, in Boundless, we theoretically have 100% uptime on your crit damage buff due to Call of Destiny's low cooldown. So if you're in Boundless and you have high enough level gems or you have Moon going, theoretically your rotation should look like Scratch Dealer, Call of Destiny Ruin Skill, Spiral Edge, Ruin Skill, and all of that should fit into the Call of Destiny crit damage buff. And then once that's done, you should be able to Scratch Dealer, Call of Destiny again, Ruin Skill, and then Spiral Edge, Ruin Skill again. What that means is that Return is basically an unneeded skill, right? It's just extra weight on top of the rotation. It's a wasted button, so why not instead put Serendipity? What that allows us to do is now we have a stronger upside when we have Cull or Judgment, or both of them. We have the upside of having Serendipity. We also have Serendipity as a counter skill, which is very nice. It just gives us a lot better damage output because we're not wasting a skill. It synergizes better with things like Three-Headed Snake as well, and Balance. And then we have Backflush, which is also actually extra weight, but it's sometimes nice, especially if you have lower level cooldown gems. It gives you some extra stacks to spend on your extra Ruin skill. But that leads me into option B, which I think is more preferable, where we get rid of Backflush as well. So for option B, what we do is we're replacing Return with Serendipity, same as before, but this time we're replacing Backflush with Evoke, okay? So if we go into the game screen again, we're looking at Backflush, or I guess Dealer's Flip. I should really call it Dealer's Flip. But what we're going to do is we're taking away Backflush. We're taking away Dealer's Flip, sorry. And we're going to grab Evoke at level 10. The tripods we want are Quick Prep level 5. And then you don't need to level these tripods, so Magic Addiction and Overlap Magic Circle. And then we're slotting it in so that now our stacking skills are Call of Destiny, Spiral Edge, and Scratch Dealer. There's no more Dealer's Flip, right? Instead, we have Evoke and Serendipity. As for our runes, in this case, we want Legendary Wealth on Evoke. This is going to be our main generator of wealth meter. So for Evoke, we put Legendary Wealth on here. And then Four of a Kind, I like to put the Purple Wealth on. Right, something like this. There's a lot of choices, right? Then we can put Blue Wealth here or whatever. Right. And then for our gems, because again, we're not using Dealer's Flip anymore, we can remove this. And it's as simple as putting the cooldown gem on Evoke. So moving back to the notepad, Backflush is removed because it's also actually additional weight. When you're in Boundless and you're pushing your rotation as quickly as you can, there's no time to really use Backflush. Things are coming back off cooldown fast enough that you don't actually need it for anything else, and so we're adding in Evoke for the utility of added card draw. This is obviously very good because the more judgments you draw, the more, whatever it is, Twisted Fate, Balance, Cull, Wheel of Fortune, whatever it is, it's all good, right? So you want more card draw. Big things to note here about using Evoke is that the meter that it builds you is almost one full bar, maybe even a little bit more. But what that means is you need to be very cognizant of if your bar is nearly full and you use Evoke, you're going to overcap, right? So you kind of want to make sure you're managing Evoke pretty well. I would say that this build is the most chaotic and hardest to play. It's the fastest pace, and there is some crisscross pattern that can be a little bit hard to manage because of how Evoke is triggered. You have to place it down, then you have to press it again after a delay to trigger it. Most of the time what you're going to be doing is you're going to be putting Evoke on the boss, using Scratch Dealer, and then pressing Evoke again to actually proc it and explode it and get your meter. That's usually what will happen. You put Evoke down, use a stacking skill, and then you pop Evoke. For this build, it is very, very important, and this is actually the case for all the builds that I've mentioned, but it's even more important for this build that you force yourself into Boundless. So this means using Four of a Kind on its resets, sometimes even when your stacks are at 0, and then maybe even throwing Serendipity away just to make sure that you can push your Boundless MP state as fast as you can. Basically, this build is the most lean, most efficient, most execution heavy of all the builds, and you get a big payoff for both your Cull and Judgment card pools. things like balance work really well and three-headed snake work really well, especially if you're good at deciding when you can use 3-stack 4 of a kinds and stuff like that. It's a very, very fast-paced build that I think has probably the highest output, but I think it's probably more usable if you have higher level gems. I think you can play it right if you have level 7 gems if you want to, but it's probably more worth it to play a higher level gems. So in summary, all of these builds work, okay? They'll all be taking advantage of the fact that Arcana right now is like the leader, it feels like, in terms of damage dealing. At least one of the leaders. I think Artillerists are probably up there as well. But it's very hard to do more damage than Arcana right now, and all of these builds that I just listed will help you do that. So I think you should play what you think is fun. If you think the pressure is too high, I recommend you go for the 3 rune skill build. It's very stable, it's very steady, it will always give you like a good output in terms of raids. And then you should move towards maybe evoke if you want something that's a little more involved. But because we're all learning this together, I'm actually really curious what you guys think. What builds have you guys tried, and have you found the execution aspect of it and the tricky parts of the class versus maybe some of the simpler parts of it? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks guys as always, and I'll see you guys on the next video.